All right. So welcome back to Taboo Talk with Sarah, the podcast that breaks the silence, fosters hope, and tackles the tough stuff so you never feel alone. If you're new here, I'm Sarah. I'm a wife, a mum to 3 amazing boys, and I've spent 25 years in the health and wellness space as a massage therapist, spa therapist, and wellness coach. My family and I live in beautiful Tasmania. And through our own mental health journey, I've become deeply passionate about opening up real, raw conversations like the one we're going to have today. This podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the Mental Wellness Company, whose products have been a game changer in my family's mental health journey. If you'd like to know more, check out the links in the show notes or reach out. But today, I am so honoured to welcome dear friend, pastor and youth advocate, Jono O'Neill. Jono is the senior pastor at... Sorry.
Keep going, mate. I interrupted. Keep going.
That's okay. Jono's the senior pastor at Tailrace Community Church, a space that's become like a second home for my family. My boys have been blessed to be part of the youth group and the recent youth camp, and I've seen firsthand the incredible role model Jono is for them. He truly sees people and walks alongside them in their journey, no matter where they're at. In this conversation, we're diving into a topic close to both of our hearts, youth mental health. We'll explore the biggest mental health challenges young people face today, how faith, community, and connection play a role in mental wellness, and the practical ways we can help support young people better. Jono, I am so grateful to have you here. You've been instrumental in helping our family get to a good space. So thank you for joining us here to get to talk about the amazing work that you do. So my first question for you, what inspired you to dedicate your life to working with young people? What's the heart behind your mission as both a pastor and a youth advocate?
Oh, great question. First of all, thanks. You're way too calm with your words, by the way. Like, you give me way too much credit for just...
I enjoy doing life with you.
Yeah, it's good fun. Your family's great.
Yeah.
So the question, what's the big idea? Like, what made me get started in that, wasn't it? That was the question.
Yes.
Yeah, so I suppose part of my story is that I went to uni. I did a health degree. I thought I wanted to go on and become a physio. I finished my bachelor's, and then before going on and doing my master's, I sort of stumbled into doing youth work. And so I was working in schools and outside of schools, part of like a national program, trying to help young people either be engaged in education or employment and overcome some of those barriers that stopped it. And then about a decade later, I found myself working in the prison. Tasmania's only got one prison. And so I was working down there in a health and wellbeing sport and rec type of role. And I just loved it. I had so much fun. But I suppose over time I became, I just wrestled with the justice system, I suppose. Like, I was sick of seeing these young kids, these young boys roll into the prison that I worked with 10 years prior as a youth worker, and there being this sort of like moment of recognition with one another. And I suppose I was, every night as I'd go home, you just come face to face with this question of like, how does rehabilitation happen for these guys, like, and girls? How does a better life that's not behind bars, that's not plagued by recidivism, what does that all look like? And I think there's probably like one story that sort of captured it really well, in that there were these 2 guys that would often hang out in the prison, you'd find us doing like push-ups together in their cells when we're doing a boot camp or having a hit of tennis or cricket or footy or whatever. And part of my role is that we brought in different sporting clubs in to play against the inmates and just have like just promote health and wellbeing in an active lifestyle. And these guys, they just sort of like caught fire with the idea, the fact that, you know, their local heroes from the local football club would come down into the prison and hang out with them, like, just blew their mind. And so one of these guys, he started enrolling in like a Cert 3 and Cert 4 in fitness, and his goal was to go, once he got outside, to sort of restart his life based around sport. And he did that, and he did it really, really well. And there was this other guy, and he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed type type of thing, I suppose. And the guards were quite empathetic towards him. They felt like he was one of the only people in the prison that was genuinely innocent. He'd simply been the fall guy for people that were more powerful, that they'd been pretty deceitful towards him, I suppose. And this young man, his time for release came and went, and then word came back that 5 days later that he'd passed away. And I just remember just being so heartbroken and awestruck. It's just the thought that this young man, like, what chance did he have in life? Like, his whole life had been led by people that had no love for him. He just lived an absolutely miserable life. And so I think contrasting those two stories and the outcomes of those two young men sort of led me to leave that prison environment, because I wanted to work on the other side of the fence to try help as many young people live a healthy and free life without ever getting tangled up in that awful system. That's the long-winded answer. I'm sorry, Sarah. So
No, that was
that's
a
kind of the
great
idea.
Yeah, like that was a great answer, and it leads into another question. So now you're on that other side of the fence, doing what you can to make a difference. So do you want to talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that you've come up with, and what you see as being the big struggles?
Yeah.
And what you're trying to do about it?
Yeah, great question. So what are we trying to do? So in our local context, we've sort of got an umbrella of programs or environments that is like a school program and a welfare program in sporting clubs, and like a social space or a youth group, and some stuff with hospitality employment. But I think the big idea really is much more of like a grassroots idea. I think so often with mental health, we think of it through this biomedical model, and the biomedical model has been such a blessing. Like, there's such a need for doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists and medicine and all the rest of it. But it becomes so clogged up if that end point is the only part on the spectrum that engages with well-being. And I think that's part of the reason why we've got a bit of a youth well-being crisis, in that there's so much attention given to those later stages and so little attention given to creating healthy environments where young people can sort of grow and strengthen and get healthier without ever ending up in that later stage. So I think that's kind of like the big idea of what we're trying to do is, whilst my heart is to see less young people end up in prison or in environments like that, we're not necessarily working in a youth justice space, but rather in a much earlier stream, like preventative health promotion, general well-being, health of society type of idea. That's the idea.
Which is great, because then we start to make a difference and we don't see as many people ending up at that end. And that's a struggle that's been like with healthcare in general. We have such a focus on cure, and we're so great with acute problems because there's a pill for that, there's surgery for that, there's immediate stuff we can do. But long-term chronic stuff, we're not so great with that. And prevention, we don't start there. We don't get at the root causes. And it's so great to see that you are actually trying to get to these kids before they end up needing that long-term help, needing the medication, needing all of those interventions. If we can start getting there and getting to the root cause of some of these problems, we might stand a better chance of making a difference.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
There's this fable or like a parable in health prevention and promotion circles that a man's by a river and he sees like a body floating down the stream next to him. So he dives in, and with all of his strength, all of his might, he wrestles this person out of the current up onto the shore and does CPR, and eventually this man comes back to life. But just as he's there sitting exhausted on the riverbank, he sees another body, and so he jumps back in the stream, and this process is repeated, and then again and again and again. And this man, this hero of the story, the whole time is thinking, if only I could just take a breath and just get upstream, and I could find out why all these people are falling in the river, and just erect a sign or a fence or something to warn people of the danger. You know, I think so much of the way we think of community and society can learn a lot from that parable. I think so much of the well-being can be traced back to feelings of anxiousness and depression, both in like the clinical sense, but also in the general sense, that stem from other issues of just feeling alone and just feeling overwhelmed and just needing a healthy environment just to sort of ride the wave through. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And I love the way that your family engage with that space too, Sarah. So I know that it's a kindred heart in that one.
Yes. I've long believed if we can get at what's causing the problem, then we stand a better chance of fixing it down the track. There's no point putting Band-Aid solutions on gaping wounds. We need to stitch the wound up. So, or better yet, stop them getting hurt in the first place.
Yeah.
And sure. That brings to another question.
Mm-hmm.
And I think community is really, really important. And I know you do too. And the Tailrace is creating spaces that create that. I know it's like a second home for my family and has been for about 10 years now, with Kids Paradise and a few other programs as well as the church. What difference do you think having that safe environment for young people and how faith in a supportive community like ours can help them navigate some of those mental health struggles?
Great question. I think that we all need safe environments where we can breathe and relax and come back down. And that, because only when we're in that non-heightened state that we can really grow or work through the things or process the things that we need to process, that we don't carry around all this baggage or all this scar tissue. So in some of the environments we try to create these middle spaces between sort of the faith and the non-faith community, because I think that all those big conversations in life are somewhat of a spiritual conversation. So when you're thinking about, for a young person, what are you going to do when you leave school? You're asking a question about identity and purpose and life direction and like who they're wired to be. I consider all that to be somewhat of a spiritual conversation. And I'm not sure if our Western secular society does a very good job of creating those sort of rich environments where people, regardless of their faith sort of opinion, can engage in those types of deeper conversations which really get to the core of who you are. And I think we miss out. And my experience has been that young people are actually really thirsty, really hungry for those kinds of conversations. Like, we've got this idea that young kids, they don't want to talk about that at all. They just want to be left alone. They just want to talk about skateboarding and vaping and TikTok and whatever else. But our research, like in-house, says the opposite. It says that they're desperate to have those conversations. They just want to do it in an environment where they feel safe, where they don't feel threatened. And from what I've observed, as people start to relax into and ask those questions and explore those big questions, like, who do I want to be? Like, how do I want to live? Like, what are my values? They really come alive because they can feel themselves growing into a person that they wish to become. It's a really exciting journey that they go on.
Yeah. I know I've loved watching the difference that being part of youth group has made to Harrison, particularly when he was going through a really rough time with being diagnosed with MS, and the changes that made for him. And we've already touched on it, but some people feel like that mental health space and faith don't always align. But how would you respond to that? And what do you think we can do to bridge that gap for those that are struggling and unsure where their faith fits in, but also with having that safe space for them to explore that? Because, like you said, they come alive when they are exploring those deeper conversations. And sometimes that's what they need, is that safe space to have those conversations. And I know that was part of what got me to start this podcast. Was I've seen people struggling with so many issues, but it's like they're not the only ones, but so often they feel like they're the only one. But then they have that conversation and somebody else goes, hey, yeah, me too. Or that they finally feel seen and heard in that space.
Yeah. No, really good question again. I think there's a lot of nuance to this question because, like, the genesis of that is, do faith and mental health overlap? And I think the answer is yes and no. Like, I think it's no, in the sense that sometimes we get this idea in faith circles that it's formulaic, like A plus B equals C. So like, if you've got poor mental health, that must mean that there's something wrong with you, or that you've got a wrong belief, or not enough faith, or wrong thought, or something. And I think that's a really damaging narrative and really unhealthy. And likewise, the flip side of that related to it is this unhealthy sort of prosperity idea that it's always up and to the right on a graph, like always up and to the right, always progressing, always more successful, more healthy. But the biblical story is so much richer than that. Like, you look at people like Elijah, and they went through this crisis of well-being. Like, he felt suicidal, and this is a great man of faith. And so quite clearly there's more to the topic than just a simple formula. But I do think that there is some sort of overlap, because I think that there's an inner peace that we're all searching for. I think that there's an anxiousness that we're just desperately tired of and that we want to be rid of. And I think that we find that true peace when we explore and discover some really healthy truth in all those areas. But I think that's a long journey, and I think that's a slow burn. And that's why I think that it's far healthy to think of, in terms of faith and well-being, as being like a journey that you walk alongside together, as opposed to a quick fix or a 10-step program or this model, but rather trying to create environments where people can sort of journey it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But it doesn't need to be an either or thing. It's more of a both and kind of conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you agree?
And yeah. And it's never as simple as we'd like to make it. It's not cut and dried. There's lots of, in all aspects of wellness, there's lots of those grey areas. It's not one size fits all. It's not one solution for everybody. It's not, oh, this thing works for them, so it'll work for everybody. And we need to take that more individualistic approach and figure out what it is that's going on, even for people who are going through similar experiences, because they come from different backgrounds. They're going to see it different ways. And we need to take that into account too.
Yeah, totally. And life is just so dynamic. Like, things happen. Not every season looks easy. So, and even sometimes it's the easy seasons that we come undone in. Like, it's just, life's a funny thing.
Because sometimes we get used to the struggle, get used to things being a certain way. And when we're in those periods where things are easy, it's like, hang on, I'm uncomfortable here because I'm waiting for that other shoe to drop. What's gonna happen? Whereas, if you've had lots of challenges and lots of problems, it's just like, I know how to operate in that space.
Yeah.
So it's funny that the being calm and peaceful can be the one that's uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a funny old world.
That's what makes it fun, though.
Yeah, certainly.
And so do you think there is any common denominator, like, for some of the challenges that you see our kids going through? Like, what do you think are the big ones? And why do you think they're struggling so much now? Like, some of the stats around youth mental health are just scary, for want of a better word. What do you think's going on?
That's a really big question. Yeah, stats are pretty horrific. Like, here in Australia, it's like 1 in 4 will struggle with mental ill health. 1 in 10 will consider self-harm. Like 1 in 13 will attempt self-harm. It's like horrific. And that's not even getting at like the truancy stats with schools, or like the abuse in homes, or the drug and alcohol, or all eating disorders. There's all sorts of ways that you can measure it, and none of them are pretty at the moment.
They're all kind of horrible.
Oh, that's horrific. What do I think is going on underneath that? I think it's a really big question. I think that part of it's got to do with the way that we think of ourselves within community, think of ourselves in the way that we're just bombarded with ideas and messages that speak to who we are all the time. Like, I know that social media is an easy one to pick on, and I'm sure that's partly to blame. I know that Some of the things that have been happening in home is an easy one to pick on. I'm sure that's partly to blame, but I just think it's a complex web. I don't think it's a simple solution. It's just wild. It's a very vague answer. I haven't given you anything reasonable there. What do you think, Sarah? What do you think is going on with it?
I think it's part of it. And I've just been rereading a book called The Impossible Just Takes Longer. And some of the stats that he mentioned in that, they were horrifying then. And that book was written more than 20 years ago. So it's only gotten worse. But some of the things that say, I think part of it is that we have lost that sense of community and connection. We're very much an individualistic society, and I can do it all myself. I've got to have it all together. And so often we wear that mask of I've got it all together. And we don't have anywhere where we can drop that and just be who we are and where we're at. But we also don't have those supports in our lives that we can go, actually, I'm not okay, and work through it with someone else. I remember when I was a kid, and I'm a bit older than you, but there was a park across the street, and I used to be able to go over and play there whenever, but we had to stay between these two particular trees. And I figured out as an adult it was because as long as we were within that space, either my mum could see us or my friend that I was playing with who lived down the road, their mum could see us. And if mum had to go out and go down the street and do something, the neighbours would watch us. Unfortunately now, so often we don't even know our neighbours for more than a passing hey as you drive out the driveway, and certainly wouldn't trust our kids with them because we don't know them well enough to do that. And I think that's part of the problem, is that we've lost that community and that connectedness where we help each other, where we see where somebody's struggling and we come alongside them and help in the ways that they need because we know them, we've been doing life with them. And I think, that's so many. We feel like we're doing everything all alone, and we were never meant to carry those kind of loads. And now you've got two parents who are working full time. You've got all these other pressures as well. And it's hard. Not that it hasn't always been hard, but I think there's a different hard now.
Yeah, certainly not easy. No. I think people's lives are just chaotic as well. It's just such a fast pace. So many of these young people, they have so little structure in terms of screens and sleep and food and just routines. It's chaotic. It makes it tricky.
It does. And while we'd love to be able to fix it all, we don't have that magic wand. But what do you think that parents, youth leaders, even young people themselves, what do you think we could do to start making a difference in what we're seeing with youth mental health?
I think people try. I really do. I think people are really caring about well-being and mental health. I don't think there's many people that just dismiss it as just being a nonsense issue. So I think people try really hard and they care deeply about it because they see the way that it impacts others, perhaps because it relates to their own stories. In terms of what we can do, I just think it would be great if people understood that they've got more power to affect change than what they realise. I think there's such a deferring to that biomedical model. And again, I love I'm not trying to trash that at all.
No.
It's more just trying to empower the grassroots, the families, the schools, the communities, that the way that you construct life can bring health and it can bring wellness without you even realising it. And so not everything has to get to this stage where someone uses a word like, I'm feeling a bit anxious, or I'm just feeling low, or the boys at the football club will say, I'm feeling flat, and it being a trigger for a doctor type thing. But I just wish that families could understand that there's so much that they can do, just the way that they sit down and do a family meal together every night, just simple habits and rhythms and routines like that. The way that they talk to one another, the way that they practice doing conflict with one another, the way that they speak words of life to one another, the way in which they, have those healthy boundaries around, bedtime and sleep and social media use. Like, you can create a really healthy ecosystem just through the habits of your life, which can bring wellness to someone, or it can go a long way at least to bringing wellness to someone. But I think we neglect that partly because we defer to the biomedical model and we don't realize the power that's within our own homes and communities. I think also when we recognize the power that is there, it brings with it like a responsibility to do something, because all of a sudden, perhaps as the parent, I need to go and work on and do my relationships counseling, right? So I can work through my own baggage so that it's a healthy environment, so my teen is in a healthier spot. So I think I think people genuinely care and they're genuinely trying. It's just tiring, and life's busy, and it's just not always front of mind. So I think it's just a bunch of those factors all rolled into one. That's what I would say. Yeah. Does
I'd have to say I agree with you.
Does anything stick to you as being particularly true or particularly untrue?
Yeah. I think it's in a lot of ways we need to be that change that we want to see, but also, it's those simple routines and little changes can make a big difference long term. So there's a reason sleep deprivation is used as a means of torture, because it causes long-term problems. We're seeing so many kids who they're not getting enough sleep, and neither are their parents. So it's having that knock-on effect. And if we're not sleeping, we're not eating well, we're not listening to our bodies, that's when we start getting into problems. And a lot of times we get really good at stuffing down those emotions and not dealing with them, to the point that we don't even know what they are. And you can't work through a problem if you don't know what it is. So, so everything you said resonates really well.
Yeah.
There's a reason we talk.
Yeah, and I think that last point about the emotions one, I think that's true of so many, but I think there's a bunch of people that are the flip side of that. They spend so much time in their emotional world that they need some people to come along and help them with some just, mental, like some stability, some common sense, just a stable ground, I suppose. Yeah, we all need help for sure. Yeah.
Yes, and that's the thing. We all need help, and we need to help each other where we can, because I think you said it. We have that responsibility to, and we have that power to. And this quote, was it? With great power comes great responsibility, but also the flip side of that, with great responsibility comes great power. So when you start taking responsibility for what's going on, that's when you can start making changes, both for your life and for others. So if anybody wanted to learn more about the incredible work that you're doing, how can they get in touch with you?
Oh, sure. People always get ascribed way too much credit. We've got such a good team here. We call it Jude's Village because it really does take a village to affect change, but I understand what you're saying. I totally understand what you're saying. So when
I say you, I actually mean the village that is the Tailrace, the team that
100%. Like, just as a beautiful picture of it, like in our youth group, we've had this. Normally, when you think of youth group, you think of like teens and young adults type thing. Young adults like serving and helping teens, but we've had these beautiful grandmas coming along and just sitting by the door and welcoming these kids. So these are women 80s or 50s or whatever else, and it's just like it's just so beautiful. Like, you really do need a village. Where can people find me? I think the easiest way is probably just to go through the Jude's website, so Jude's Cafe. Just a quick Google search and you'll find that, and then through there you'll find like our impact reports and a contact form and all the rest of that. That's probably the easiest way. I'm not on socials very much anymore, so if you could reach out to me there, but I would probably miss it. But otherwise, email's a great one. So my email address is jono@tailrace.com.au. So that's Jono, Jono @tailrace, TAILRACE.com.au. So those would be the two best ways. We're normally pretty prompt through both of those.
And we'll put those in the show notes too, so make it nice and easy for people.
Sounds good.
And I don't have any more questions for you, although, well, no more specific questions that I'd prepared. I could stay here and talk to you all day, but you've got stuff to do, and so do I. But thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your insights. I'm so grateful for the role you play in our community and for the difference that you've made to my boys. So when I told them that I was interviewing you today, they got all excited. So
they're red bags.
It's like, yeah, Jono's coming on. Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Sarah. You're too kind.
Yeah.
I love the courage that you've got to be able to start something new like this. I'm sure it will go incredibly well. So congratulations and thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, part of the idea was just to start those conversations, because I think we'll be able to solve a lot more problems if we just actually talk about them, and find much more common ground if we just keep talking. So for our listeners, I hope this sparked some new ideas, has offered you hope and reminded you that there are lots of ways that you can support the young people in your life. You're not alone, neither are they. If you want to connect with Jono or learn more about the work happening at Tailrace Community Church, check out the show notes. The links will be in there. And if this episode resonated with you, please subscribe to Taboo Talk with Sarah on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Maybe leave me a review, because your feedback helps us to reach more people. It also gives me an idea of the conversations you want me to have. So if there's anybody that you think I really need to talk to, please let me know. And share this episode with someone you think needs to hear it. So until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Remember, your story matters, so please keep telling it, and we're all in this together. And I will see you in the next episode of Taboo Talk with Sarah, and I'll see you next week, Jono.
Great job. Thanks so much.